The staff at the Sovereign Club called him the Wolf. Not to his face, of course. To his face, they called him Mr. Wolf. And they did so with trembling hands and eyes fixed on the floor. Fisher Wolf, whose net worth was discussed in the same tones as a natural disaster, was a man who fed on fear. He broke waiters, made managers cry, and held the power to end a career with a single, bored complaint. For 5 years, no one had dared to meet his gaze. Until the new waitress, on her 3rd day, with nothing left to lose, walked straight up to his table and broke the silence. The Sovereign Club was not a restaurant. It was a cathedral of wealth, tucked away on a cobblestone street in Manhattan's most exclusive zip code. Its unlisted phone number and 100-year-old oak doors were a testament to old money and new power. The air inside was heavy with the scent of beeswax, aged Bordeaux, and the unspoken pressure of expectation. The clientele, hedge fund titans, shipping magnates, and the quiet aristocracy of Park Avenue demanded perfection. The staff, polished to a high sheen, delivered it with the silent, efficient terror of a bomb squad. And then there was Table 12. When Fisher Wolf entered the restaurant, a wave of cold air seemed to follow him. The low, confident murmur of the dining room didn't just quiet, it fractured. Conversation stalled. Silverware paused halfway to mouths. He was a tall man, impeccably dressed in a bespoke suit so dark it seemed to absorb the light. His face was sharp, angular, and utterly devoid of warmth. He didn't walk, he stalked. "Mr. Wolf, an honor, as always," stammered the maître d', Gregory, a man who had faced down food critics and celebrities with unflappable calm, but who visibly wilted in Fisher's presence. Fisher didn't respond. He merely shrugged off his cashmere coat, letting it fall toward the floor. Gregory lunged, catching it an inch before it touched the antique Persian rug. Fisher continued to his preferred table, Table 12, in the corner, with a commanding view of the room and his back to a solid wall. He sat. He didn't look at the menu presented to him. He simply slapped it, a sharp, dismissive gesture that sent it skittering across the table. "Water." "Still." "No ice," he snapped, his voice a low rasp that cut through the restored silence. "Of course, Mr. Wolf." In the kitchen, the tension was a physical thing. The head chef, a man famed for his Michelin stars and his volcanic temper, was silent. "Who's got him?" whispered a junior waiter named Ben, his face pale. "Sarah was supposed to, but she called in sick," whispered another. "She said it was food poisoning. We all know it's wolf-itis. Gregory is going to have to take him." "He can't. The Van Huysen party just arrived. He has to greet them." A tense silence fell over the service station. Everyone stared at their shoes. This was the moment careers died. A forgotten spoon, a moment's hesitation, the cardinal sin of asking, "How is everything?" Any of it could lead to a quiet word with Gregory, and by morning, your locker would be empty. "I'll take him." The voice was new, clear, calm, and without a tremor. Maya Linden tied the knot on her pristine white apron. It was her 3rd day. She had spent the first 2 learning the complex, unwritten rules of the Sovereign Club. Which guest preferred which table, who drank what, and above all, the primary rule: never approach Table 12 unless summoned, and never make eye contact with Fisher Wolf. Ben stared at her. "Maya, no, you don't understand. This isn't just a difficult guest. He's a monster. Last month, he had a busboy fired because he sneezed 2 tables away." Maya picked up a silver tray, a water carafe, and a single crystal glass. "Does he have a food allergy?" "No, but..." "Is he physically violent?" "No, but he's..." Ben struggled for the word. "He's brutal. He'll find your weakest spot and press on it until you break. He's waiting for you to be afraid." Maya looked at Ben, a small, sad smile touching her lips for a fraction of a second. "I've handled worse." She pushed through the swinging door. The dining room's hush immediately enveloped her. She walked with a straight back and an economy of motion that spoke of long, hard years in the service industry. She didn't hurry. She didn't hesitate. Fisher was staring out the window, his expression one of profound, angry boredom. He sensed her approach, and his eyes snapped to her. They were a startling, cold grey, like a winter ocean. He was expecting Gregory, or perhaps some trembling new sacrifice. He was not expecting her. Maya placed the glass down, the crystal making almost no sound on the heavy linen. She poured the still water. "Will you be having your usual, sir?" she asked. His eyes narrowed. The usual was a test. He never had a usual. He ordered something different every time, forcing the staff to scramble, often for ingredients they didn't have. "And what?" he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Would you presume my usual to be?" He was baiting her. He wanted her to stutter, to apologize, to crumble. Maya didn't. She met his gaze. The staff hiding by the service station collectively held their breath. No one met his gaze. "Based on your past 3 visits," Maya said, her voice even and low, "you've ordered the steak au poivre, rare. You sent the first one back because the peppercorns weren't crushed fresh. You sent the second back because the cognac sauce was tepid. On your 3rd visit, you specified exactly how you wanted it prepared. Chef complied. You ate all of it." She paused. "So, I will ask him to prepare the steak au poivre, rare, with hand-crushed peppercorns and a cognac sauce served at 180 degrees, unless you'd prefer something else." The silence in the room was now absolute. Even the Van Huysen party had stopped talking. Fisher-Wolf stared at her. His face, usually a mask of bored contempt, was blank. It was the blankness of a computer that had just received a command it didn't understand. He had built an empire, worth more than the GDP of a small country, on his ability to read people, to find their leverage point, their fear, their greed, their ambition. He looked at Maya Linden. He saw no fear. He saw no ambition. He saw nothing. Just a calm, steady presence. It was like shouting at a mountain. He leaned back, a slow, dangerous movement. "You're new." It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir. You've been studying me." "I've been studying all the guests. It's my job." He held her gaze for a full 30 seconds, a pressure tactic that had made CEOs of Fortune 500 companies stammer. Maya simply waited, her hands clasped loosely behind her back. Finally, he gave a single, sharp nod. "Fine. Do it." He turned back to the window, a gesture of dismissal. Maya walked back to the kitchen. The moment the door swung shut behind her, she let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Ben and the others were staring at her, as if she had just tamed a dragon. I can't believe it," Ben whispered. "You're still employed." "He hasn't eaten yet," Maya said, smoothing her apron. She punched the order into the system. In the dining room, Fisher-Wolf stared at his glass of water. He hadn't noticed her face. Not really. Just her eyes. They weren't defiant. They weren't brave. They were just empty of him. He was, to her, just another part of the job. For the first time in a decade, Fisher-Wolf felt something other than irritation or boredom. He felt curiosity, and that, to him, was the most dangerous feeling of all. The meal proceeded with the tension of a ceasefire. Maya operated with flawless precision. She served the steak, which she had personally inspected in the kitchen. She refreshed his water without being asked. She never hovered, yet she appeared the instant he seemed to need something. She did it all while pointedly not pandering to him. She treated him exactly as she treated the elderly couple at table 7 and the noisy tourists at table 3, who had somehow gotten a reservation by mistake. Fisher ate. He didn't complain. He didn't praise. He simply consumed the meal, his eyes occasionally flicking up to watch her as she moved through the room. He saw her handle the boisterous tourists with polite, firm boundaries. He saw her patiently explaining an obscure dish to the couple at table 7. He watched as the drunk scion of a real estate family at table 9 tried to grab her arm. Maya didn't pull away. She didn't gasp. She simply stopped, turned her body, and used her tray to apply a subtle, painful pressure point to his wrist, forcing him to release her. She did it with a smile so neutral it could have been painted on. "Sir," she said, her voice still perfectly modulated. "Your wine." The young man, his face pale with a mix of alcohol and surprise, muttered an apology. Fisher watched the entire exchange. It was fast, professional, and utterly brutal. It was the kind of move a bodyguard might make, not a waitress at the Sovereign Club. When he was finished, Maya cleared his plate. "Will there be anything else, Mr. Wolf? Dessert? Coffee?" "The check," he grunted. She brought it. He signed the bill, adding a tip that was, by his standards, obscene. It was more than her entire weekly salary. He did it as another test. He wanted to see her react, to see a flicker of gratitude or excitement. Maya glanced at the total, her expression unchanged. "Thank you, sir. Have a good evening." She turned and walked away. Fisher sat there for another 5 minutes. He stared at the tip, then at her, retreating back. Nothing. No reaction. He felt an unfamiliar surge of anger. No, it was frustration. He had just thrown a $1,000 grenade at her, and she hadn't even flinched. He stood, grabbed his coat, and stormed out of the restaurant, leaving Gregory to stammer a "Good night, sir," to his back. The moment his car, a black, armored Maybach, pulled away from the curb, he was on the phone. "Leo!" he snapped, not bothering with a greeting. His voice was cold. Leo Quinn was his head of security, a man who found things. "Sir." "A new waitress at the Sovereign Club. Name is Maya Linden. I want to know everything. Where she was born, where she went to school, what she ate for breakfast, and why she isn't afraid of me. I want it by morning." "Understood, Mr. Wolf." The line clicked off. Fisher stared out at the blur of New York City lights. He had built Wolf Capital by identifying patterns everyone else missed. He saw risk, he saw weakness, he saw opportunity. Maya Linden was a disruption in the pattern. She was a variable he couldn't account for, and Fisher Wolf hated variables. The next morning, Fisher was in his penthouse office, a glass-walled box overlooking Central Park, when Leo Quinn arrived. Leo was a large, impassive man who looked like he'd been carved from a block of concrete. "Sir," Leo said, placing a thin manila folder on Fisher's massive obsidian desk. Fisher didn't look up from his terminal. "Report." "There's a problem." Fisher's fingers stopped typing. He looked up, his grey eyes narrowing. "Leo, you are paid an astronomical sum of money, precisely so there are never problems." "I can't find her, sir." "What do you mean you can't find her? She's at the restaurant. Go and get her." "No, sir. I mean, Maya Linden doesn't exist." Leo opened the folder. It was mostly empty. "There's a social security number, issued 6 months ago. A rented apartment in a walk-up in Queens, paid in cash, 6 months in advance. A bank account opened with a cash deposit, also 6 months ago. Before that, nothing. No birth certificate, no school records, no credit history, no social media, no family, no driver's license." Maya Linden was born 6 months ago, fully formed. Fisher leaned back, his chair hissing in protest. A ghost. A very good one, Leo agreed. The references on her application for the restaurant were solid. A diner in Chicago, a hotel in Miami. I called them. The numbers were real. The managers gave glowing reviews. And, Fisher prompted, the numbers were burner phones. The managers were voice actors, probably hired off a gig website. The diner and hotel addresses are empty lots. She built a completely fake employment history, good enough to pass a standard check, but not good enough to pass this. Fisher was silent. He tapped a finger on the desk. So the woman who served me my dinner last night is a phantom. Why? What does she want? Is she corporate espionage? A reporter? Is she after me? It's possible, Leo said. She's working a low-wage job in a place you're known to frequent. It's the classic honey trap or intel gathering setup. Fisher considered this. No. If she were a honey trap, she would have flirted. If she wanted money, she would have reacted to the tip. If she was a reporter, she would have tried to engage me in conversation. She did none of those things. She did her job. And that move with the drunk, the wrist lock. I saw that on the restaurant's security feed, Leo said. It's a compliance technique, not military but close, law enforcement or high-end private security. She's trained. Fisher stood and walked to the window. The city spread out below him like a circuit board. He was the one who pulled the strings. He was the one who knew the secrets. Now, a waitress with empty eyes and a fake name was serving him steak and lies. She's not after my money, Fisher said, more to himself. She's not after my company. She's different. What are your orders, sir? I can have her picked up. We can interrogate her. Fisher's first instinct was, yes. Tear her down, find the truth, expose her. But then he remembered her eyes, that unnerving, profound calm, the absence of fear. No, Fisher said, a slow, predatory smile touching his lips for the first time. No. Don't pick her up. Don't let her know we're watching. I want a 24/7 tail on her. I want to know where she sleeps, where she shops, who she talks to. I want to know why she's a ghost. He turned from the window. Game on, Maya Linden. Whatever you are. For the next 2 weeks, Fisher Wolf became a regular at the Sovereign Club in a way he had never been before. He appeared 3, sometimes 4 times a week, and every time he sat at table 12 and demanded Maya. The staff, who had first viewed Maya as a sacrificial lamb, now saw her as something between a zoo tamer and a saint. The wolf was still rude, still demanding, still cold. But the all-out tantrums, the firings, the soul-crushing tirades, they stopped. His irritation was now laser-focused on his new waitress. He tested her. He ordered impossible dishes. I want the oysters Rockefeller, but not with spinach, with fiddlehead ferns, sautéed. Maya didn't blink. The ferns are out of season, sir. They'd be woody and bitter. I can, however, have the chef prepare a similar dish with samphire greens, which have the same mineral note you're looking for. He'd grunt. Fine. He changed his wine order 3 times, demanding an obscure vintage from a small defunct vineyard in the Loire Valley. Maya returned from the cellar. We don't have the 2009, sir. The vineyard flooded that year. The entire yield was lost. The sommelier recommends the 2011, which has a similar profile. However, I would recommend the 2012 from the neighboring estate. It's half the price, and frankly, a superior bottle. The 2011 was over-oaked. He'd glare, knowing she was right, and snap, bring the 2012, and don't smugly tell me I told you so. Of course not, sir, she'd reply, her voice a mask of perfect service. Meanwhile, Leo Quinn's surveillance team was growing increasingly frustrated. "She's a rock, sir," Leo reported, his own professional pride clearly wounded. "She goes from the restaurant to her apartment, from her apartment to the restaurant. Once a week she goes to a public library in Queens and uses a computer for exactly 1 hour. Then she leaves. She pays for everything in cash. She talks to no one. She is a ghost." "What about the library computer?" Fisher demanded. "Wiped. She uses a privacy-focused operating system booted from a USB stick. When she logs off, it's like she was never there. She's a professional. This is above my pay grade, sir. This is intelligence agency-level tradecraft." Fisher felt a thrill. This wasn't a reporter. This was something far more interesting. His obsession with Maya, however, was happening at a dangerous time. Fisher was in the middle of the most hostile, vicious corporate battle of his career. He was trying to acquire a green energy conglomerate, Helios Dynamics. The only thing standing in his way was a rival billionaire. A man as flamboyant and public as Fisher was cold and private. Victor Holloway. Holloway was new money, a brash, charismatic monster who loved the spotlight, appeared on magazine covers, and was rumored to have built his empire on stolen ideas and shattered partnerships. He and Fisher hated each other with a purity that was almost spiritual. Fisher was in his office, reviewing the hostile bid documents, when his private line rang. "You're slipping, Wolf." Victor Holloway's voice boomed over the speakerphone, full of false laughter. "I thought you had this Helios deal in the bag, but my sources say you've been distracted, spending a lot of time tasting wine at the Sovereign Club. Found a new hobby?" Fisher's blood ran cold. "My hobbies are none of your concern, Victor. The deal will be concluded by Friday." "I don't think so," Victor sang. "I just bought a 5% stake, bumped the price. It's going to cost you another $1 billion. Unless you've gone soft, maybe you should stick to dinner." Fisher hung up. Holloway knew he was at the restaurant. How? Did he have a tail on him? Or was there a leak inside Wolf Capital? He buzzed Leo. "Quinn, Holloway, he knows my movements. Check my car, check my office, and check my people. Now!" Fisher leaned back, the pieces clicking into place. A ghost appears in his life. Suddenly, his most ruthless rival knows things he shouldn't. The two had to be connected. Was Maya working for Holloway? Was this all an elaborate, long con set up to distract him, to gather intel? Was her fearlessness just the confidence of someone who knew they had the upper hand? The curiosity he'd felt was instantly replaced by a familiar, cold rage. He had been played. He had been made a fool of. By a waitress. "Leo," Fisher said, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "Change of plans. Find her. Bring her to me. Not to the office. To the penthouse. Tonight." That night, Maya finished her shift. The alley behind the Sovereign Club was dark and slick with rain. She pulled her thin jacket tighter, the $1,000 tip from 2 weeks ago, long gone to pay for things. She was tired. The constant dance with Fisher Wolf was exhausting. He was a distraction she couldn't afford. She walked toward the subway, her footsteps echoing. She heard a second set of footsteps behind her. They weren't Leo's men. She knew their patterns. They were sloppy, content to sit in their black sedan at the end of the block. These footsteps were different, lighter, more purposeful. She turned a corner onto a darker, emptier street. The footsteps followed, closer now. Her heart, which had been steady in the face of Fisher Wolf's billions, began to pound. This was the fear she knew. This was the fear she'd been running from. She quickened her pace. so did the shadow. She ducked into another alley, a shortcut she knew. It was a dead end. But there was a fire escape. She ran, her cheap boots slipping on the wet pavement. A man stepped out from behind a dumpster, blocking her path. He was large, with a scarred face and dead eyes. His name was Ronan. She knew him. He was the one she had been running from for a year. "Maya," he said, his voice a gravelly monotone. "Or whatever you're calling yourself. You've been a hard girl to find. Holloway's been very patient. He wants his property back." Maya's blood turned to ice. "I don't have anything for you, Ronan. Don't lie. The ledger, the drive. You took it when your father had his accident. Just give it to me, and I'll make this quick. Holloway's orders." Maya's hand slipped into her pocket, her fingers brushing against a small metal object. She was trapped. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, backing up. "Pity," Ronan said, pulling something from his jacket. Suddenly, a black sedan squealed around the corner, its high beams flooding the alley, pinning them both in a blinding white light. The car door flew open. "Get in!" Leo Quinn yelled, leveling a pistol at Ronan. Ronan, momentarily blinded, cursed and ducked behind the dumpster. Maya didn't hesitate. She didn't know who these men were, but they weren't Ronan. She sprinted for the car, diving into the back seat. "Go! Go!" Leo shouted at the driver. The car fishtailed on the wet pavement and rocketed out of the alley, just as Ronan fired 2 shots. The ping of bullets hitting the armored trunk echoed in the small space. Maya was breathing hard, her adrenaline spiking. She looked at Leo in the front seat. "Who are you? What's going on?" Leo just looked at her in the rearview mirror, his face grim. "Mr. Wolf wants to see you." "I just finished my shift," Maya said, her voice shaking slightly, the first crack in her armor. "This isn't about your shift," Leo said, his eyes flicking back to the road. "And you can drop the act. We know Maya Linden is a ghost. The question is, who are you really?" The car sped through the night, taking her from one predator straight to the lair of another. The private elevator to Fisher Wolf's penthouse moved with unnerving silence and speed. Maya stood in the corner, flanked by Leo and another security guard. Her waitress uniform was damp with rain and alley grime. She had wiped the fear from her face, replacing it with a cold, hard mask. But inside, she was vibrating. Ronan. He had found her. After all this time, he had found her. The doors opened directly into Fisher's living room. It was less a room than a void. 3 walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a 270-degree view of Manhattan. The city lights glittered below like a carpet of diamonds. The furniture was minimal, black and chrome, and unforgivingly modern. It was the home of a man who hated comfort. Fisher Wolf stood in the center of the room, not in one of his bespoke suits, but in a simple black Henley and dark trousers. He looked less like a billionaire and more like a panther in a cage. "Leave us," he commanded. Leo and the guard nodded, retreating to the elevator. The doors slid shut, leaving Maya alone with him. "He was going to kill you," Fisher said. His voice wasn't a question. "Yes." "Who was he?" "A man I used to know." "Try again," Fisher snapped, his voice lashing out. "Who was he, and why is he working for Victor Holloway?" Maya's head snapped up. Her eyes, usually so calm, flashed with genuine shock. How do you know that name?" "Because he called me today," Fisher said, walking toward her. "He knew I was distracted by a new waitress. I thought you were his spy. I thought this whole fearless waitress act was a game to get close to me. But a spy doesn't get cornered in an alley by her own boss's hitman." He stopped, just inches from her. So, I'll ask you one more time. Who are you? Maya looked at the man before her. The wolf she served steak to was a performance, a shield of irritation and power. This man was different. Colder, quieter, and far more dangerous. He was the one who had just saved her life, even if it was by accident. She was trapped. Ronan knew where she worked. Holloway's net was closing. She had one move left. It was the move she had been planning all along, the one she'd been too afraid, or too smart, to make. "My real name," she said, her voice low and tight, "is Maya Bennett." Fisher's expression didn't change, but a flicker of recognition passed through his eyes. "Bennett? As in Arthur Bennett?" "The analyst. He worked for Holloway. Brilliant strategist. Blew his brains out in his Hamptons house last year. Police ruled it a suicide." "He didn't kill himself," Maya said, and now her voice was shaking, not with fear, but with a year's worth of compressed rage. "He was murdered by Holloway." Fisher was still. "Prove it." "Arthur Bennett was my father," Maya said. "He was the architect of Holloway's entire empire. He designed the trading algorithms, he found the acquisition targets. Holloway was just a charismatic bully who took the credit. My father, he was gentle, he was a genius, but he was weak. He didn't see what Holloway was until it was too late." She walked past him, toward the window, looking down at the city that had swallowed her. "My father found out Holloway was running a massive fraud, using shell corporations to inflate assets, engaging in corporate espionage, the kind of stuff that sends you to prison forever. My father confronted him. He was going to go to the SEC. 3 days later, he was dead. Holloway's man, Ronan, staged it as a suicide." "Ronan," Fisher said. "The man in the alley." "Yes. After the funeral, Ronan came to the house. He wasn't there to offer condolences. He was there to clean up. He was looking for my father's proof. He thought it was on his main computer. But my father was smarter than that. He knew Holloway would come for him. He kept a separate ledger, an encrypted hard drive. And he gave it to me." Maya's hand went to her pocket. She pulled out the object she had clutched in the alley. It wasn't a weapon. It was a small, biometric USB drive. "I ran," she said. "I vanished. I became Maya Linden. I liquidated everything I could, created a new identity, and I ran. But Ronan never stopped looking, and I stopped running. I got tired. I decided to hunt the hunter." Fisher finally understood. "You came to New York. You got a job at the Sovereign Club, a place I go." "A place you and Holloway both go," she corrected. "It was the one place I knew I could get near the 2 biggest sharks in the tank. I've spent 6 months watching you both. I was trying to figure out which one of you I could trust, or at least, which one of you hated the other one more." "And what did you decide?" Fisher asked, his voice a low growl. "I decided," Maya said, turning to face him, "that you're a monster, Mr. Wolf, but you're an honest monster. You destroy companies in the open. You don't hide in the shadows. Holloway, he's a snake. He's a fraud. And he murdered my father." She held out the drive. "This is everything. The ledger, the offshore accounts, the predated orders, the wiretaps. It's the key to his entire kingdom. It's enough to destroy him, and probably anyone associated with him." Fisher looked at the drive, then at her face. The mask was gone. He saw the exhaustion, the grief, and the terrifying, burning core of her resolve. This was the source of her fearlessness. When you're hunting a man who stole your life, a rude billionaire asking for the wrong wine doesn't even register. "You were going to give this to me?" he asked. "I was going to use it as leverage," she said. "To get you to help me, to expose him, to get justice for my father. Then you put a tail on me, and Ronan found me, and the whole plan went to hell." Fisher was silent. He looked at the drive. This was the weapon he needed to win the Helios deal. It was more than that. It was enough to remove Victor Holloway from the board entirely. He could have him arrested, disgraced, and bankrupted by morning. But it was also a trap. If he took it, he was involving himself in a murder. "You're smarter than this," Fisher said. "You walked into my restaurant. You let me see you. You let me get curious. You wanted me to dig. You wanted me to find the ghost. You wanted me to bring you here." Maya gave a small, tired smile. "I didn't know about Ronan. That was a complication. But yes, I couldn't get a meeting with Fisher-Wolf. But I could get Fisher-Wolf to demand a meeting with Maya Linden. I just had to be interesting." Fisher let out a short, harsh laugh. It was a sound that hadn't been heard in this penthouse in years. "You're insane," he said. "I'm desperate," she replied. He looked at her, this small, tired woman in a waitress uniform who had just outmaneuvered him, Victor Holloway, and his entire security team. She hadn't been afraid of him because, from the moment she walked in, she was the one with the power. He took the drive. "You're not safe in your apartment. You're not safe anywhere. Ronan won't stop." "I know. You'll stay here," he commanded. "In the guest wing. Leo and his team will guard this building. No one gets in or out. We will analyze this data. And if it's real, we will burn Victor Holloway to the ground." "Just like that?" Maya asked, surprised by the sudden alliance. Fisher plugged the drive into a secure, air-gapped laptop. He typed in the biometric access code Maya gave him. Files upon files appeared, charts, bank transfers, audio recordings. He looked up at her, his grey eyes no longer cold, but burning with a sudden, terrible purpose. "Just like that," Fisher-Wolf said. "He involved my business, he threatened my operations, and he made the fatal mistake of underestimating one of my staff." He paused. "You're not a waitress anymore, Ms. Bennett. As of now, you work for me." The guest wing of Fisher's penthouse was as cold and beautiful as the rest of it. It was a suite of rooms decorated in shades of grey and white, with a stunning view of the park. It was also a gilded cage. Leo's men were posted in the hall and in the lobby downstairs. Maya, or Maya Bennett, as she was now, stood under a scalding hot shower, washing the grime of the alley and the terror of Ronan off her skin. When she emerged, she found clothes laid out on the bed, a simple black cashmere sweater and trousers. They were her size. Fisher's efficiency was terrifying. For the next 48 hours, the penthouse became a war room. Fisher barely slept. He had a team of his most trusted forensic accountants and lawyers brought to the penthouse, all signing ironclad NDAs enforced by the stony presence of Leo Quinn. They lived on black coffee and adrenaline, poring over the data on Maya's drive. It was worse, and better, than she had even known. "He didn't just defraud his investors," one of the lawyers said, his voice awed. "He's been laundering money for 3 different international cartels. He has 2 SEC officials on his payroll. This isn't just prison time. This is a threat to national security." Fisher sat at the head of the long conference table, his focus absolute. He was in his element. This was a battle, and he was a general. Maya sat at the other end. She was no longer a participant. She was a resource. They asked her questions about her father, about names and dates, and she answered. But the momentum had been seized by Fisher. In the quiet moments, she watched him. The wolf persona was gone, replaced by this creature of pure, cold focus. But she started to see other things too. She saw him in the middle of the night, standing by the vast windows, not looking at the view, but at a single, small, framed photo on a side table. She never got close enough to see it clearly. When he noticed her watching, he'd stiffen, the mask of the billionaire sliding back into place. "You should sleep," he'd said, his voice curt. "So should you," she'd countered. "I don't sleep." They developed a strange, terse rhythm. She'd make coffee and just place a mug on his desk. He'd have food brought in and ensure she ate. There were no pleasantries, just a shared, humming tension. On the third night, she found him in the kitchen, staring at the sterile, stainless steel appliances as if he didn't know what they were. "It's all here," he said, gesturing to the conference room. "It's enough. We can move." "What's the plan?" "Holloway is hosting the Future of Energy Gala at the Met in 2 days. He's the keynote speaker. It's his coronation. He's going to announce his final, successful bid for Helios Dynamics, boxing me out. The press will be there. The SEC commissioner will be there. Half of Washington will be there." "You're going to have him arrested at his own party," Maya said, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Not just arrested," Fisher said, a glint in his eye. "Publicly dismantled. I've given the data to the Attorney General. They're moving fast. But they're letting me choreograph the opening scene." A sense of lightheadedness swept over Maya. It was almost over. A year of running. A year of terror. "My father." "His name will be cleared," Fisher said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "The data proves he was the whistleblower, not a co-conspirator. He will be a hero." Tears welled in Maya's eyes, hot and sudden. She had not cried in a year. She fought them back, embarrassed. Thank you." Fisher looked at her, his expression unreadable. He took a half step toward her, his hand lifting slightly, as if to comfort her. The gesture was awkward, alien to him. "You brought the weapon, Miss Bennett," he said. "I'm just pulling the trigger." The moment of vulnerability passed, shattered by the chime of the private elevator. They both tensed. It was 3:00 a.m. No one was scheduled to arrive. Fisher's eyes went to a security panel on the wall. He pressed a button. The screen flickered to life, showing the inside of the elevator. It was Leo Quinn. And he was not alone. Ronan stood beside him, a smug look on his scarred face. And between them, held at gunpoint, was Ben, the young waiter from the Sovereign Club. Fisher's blood ran cold. "Leo," he whispered, his voice a mix of confusion and pure ice. A speaker crackled. "Open the door, Fisher," Leo's voice said. "Holloway is tired of this. He knows you have the drive. He wants to negotiate an exchange." Maya stared at the screen, her face white. "Leo. He's working for Holloway. He was the leak." He's been with me for 15 years, Fisher said, his mind reeling. The betrayal was so profound, it was disorienting. He had built his life on loyalty, on a small, impenetrable circle, and his chief of security, the man he trusted with his life, was a traitor. "He knows the security codes," Fisher said, his voice flat. "He knows the layout. He knows the blind spots. He's not here to negotiate." The digital lock on the penthouse door beeped. The override code. "Fisher," Leo's voice came again. "Don't be stupid. Just give us the girl and the drive. Holloway will let you have Helios. He'll even cut you in. This is just business." "He's lying," Maya whispered. "He'll kill us all. He has to." Fisher looked at Maya. The fear was back in her eyes. But this time, he saw something else, too. He saw the same resolve he'd seen in the restaurant. He grabbed her arm. "This way." He pulled her from the kitchen, through the living room, toward his private study. The elevator doors dinged open behind them. "Fisher, don't make this messy," Leo shouted. Fisher slammed the study door shut and hit a heavy steel bolt. He crossed to his desk, which was, like everything, sleek and modern. He pressed a hidden button underneath. A section of the mahogany-paneled wall slid open, revealing a small, dark space. A panic room. "Get in," he ordered Maya. "What about you?" "This room is shielded. They can't get in. But it has no exit. It's a tomb. I'm not going in. I'm getting us out." "Fisher, they have guns!" Heavy footsteps pounded outside the study. "Last chance, boss!" Leo yelled. Fisher grabbed a heavy bronze statue from his desk, an award of some kind. He looked at Maya. "When I get this door open, you run. You run back to the kitchen. There's a service elevator. Go. Take this." He grabbed a burner phone from his desk drawer and shoved it at her. "The AG's number is programmed. Call it. Tell them to move. Now. I'm not leaving you." A gunshot exploded, splintering the wood of the study door. "Go!" Fisher roared. He took a deep breath, hefted the statue, and kicked the door open, charging straight at Leo Quinn. Fisher burst from the study, a primal yell tearing from his throat. He was no longer the cold billionaire. He was the wolf. Leo was surprised. He was expecting a surrender, not a banzai charge. He raised his pistol, but Fisher was too fast. He swung the heavy bronze statue, crashing it against Leo's wrist. Bones cracked. The gun clattered to the floor. "You!" Fisher snarled, grabbing his former security chief by the throat and slamming him against the wall. "You, of all people!" Ronan, who had been pushing the terrified waiter Ben ahead of him, turned. He raised his own gun, but Maya was already moving. She didn't run for the kitchen. She sprinted at Ronan, kicking the back of his knee, buckling his leg. Ronan roared in pain and stumbled, his shot going wild, shattering one of the massive windows. The sound of the imploding glass was deafening, and a sudden, violent wind whipped through the penthouse, scattering papers and turning the air cold. Ben scrambled away, hiding behind a sofa. Ronan recovered, smashing a backhand into Maya's face. She fell hard. He raised his gun to finish her. "No!" Fisher yelled. He released Leo, who crumpled to the floor, and launched himself at Ronan. The two men crashed onto the expensive rug, a tangle of limbs. Fisher was strong, but Ronan was a street fighter, brutal and dirty. Ronan jammed a thumb into Fisher's eye. Fisher bellowed in pain, and Ronan used the opening to roll on top, his hands going for Fisher's throat. "You should have stayed out of it, Wolf," he hissed, his face contorted. "Holloway pays better." Fisher's vision was spotting. He was losing. From the floor, Maya saw Leo Quinn crawling toward his fallen gun. He was injured, but his loyalty to Holloway, or his fear of him, was stronger. "Leo, don't!" she screamed. Leo grabbed the gun. He raised it, his hand shaking, trying to get a clear shot at Fisher. Maya looked around frantically. Her eyes landed on the broken window. The wind was howling through it, a vortex of cold air. The penthouse was 70 floors up. Ronan was squeezing the life from Fisher. Fisher's hands clawed uselessly at Ronan's thick arms. Leo steadied his aim. Maya got to her feet. She grabbed the heaviest thing she could find, a chrome armchair, and threw it, not at Leo, but at the rest of the shattered window. The chair, propelled by her adrenaline, smashed through the remaining shards. The already strong wind became a catastrophic, shrieking gale. The differential in pressure sucked everything not bolted down toward the new, gaping hole. Magazines, cushions, a glass sculpture, all were ripped from their places and pulled into the night sky. Leo, caught off guard, was dragged along the polished floor. He screamed, dropping the gun, scrabbling for a handhold. He managed to grab the leg of the massive, bolted-down sofa. He hung on, the wind tearing at his clothes. Ronan, who was heavier, was also pulled. He was forced to release Fisher's throat to plant his hands on the floor. Fisher gasped, air flooding his lungs. He saw his chance. He kicked up, a brutal, powerful strike with both legs into Ronan's chest. The kick, combined with the hurricane-force wind, was too much. Ronan slid backward. His eyes went wide with pure animal terror. He clawed at the floor, but there was nothing to hold. He hit the edge of the opening. For one horrifying second, he hung suspended, his body parallel to the floor. Then, the city claimed him. His scream was stolen by the wind. Silence fell in the penthouse, a terrible, howling silence, broken only by the wind and Leo Quinn's pathetic sobs as he clung to the sofa. Fisher pushed himself up, his throat raw, his eyes swelling shut. He staggered over to Leo. He looked down at the man who had been his shadow for 15 years. "Why, Leo?" Fisher whispered, his voice raw. My son," Leo wept. "He has a rare blood disorder. The treatments, they cost a fortune. Holloway, he found out. He offered to pay for everything. For life. All I had to do was report. Just report on you. Then tonight, he said they found the girl. He said I had to get them in, or my son's funding would be cut. And so would his life." Fisher stared at him. The rage was gone, replaced by a vast, cold emptiness. He had just been betrayed for the oldest reason in the book, love and money. He turned away from Leo and went to Maya. She was pushing her hair out of her face, a dark bruise already forming on her cheek where Ronan had hit her. She was shaking, but she was alive. She looked at him, at his battered face and torn shirt. "That," she panted, "was not in the plan." G-Compare Fisher ripped the burner phone from his pocket, where he'd put it when the fight started. He saw Maya had already grabbed her own. They both looked at the phones, then at each other. "We need to get to the gala," Fisher said, his voice a rasp. "Fisher, look at you. Look at this place. We're not going anywhere." "Holloway lost," Fisher said, a new, terrifying energy filling him. "His men are gone. He doesn't know. He's at that gala right now, giving a speech, thinking he's won. He thinks we're dead." He grabbed Leo by the collar, dragging him to his feet. You're going to walk out of here with us. You're going to get us into that gala, or the wind can have you too." Leo, his face a mask of tears and terror, nodded frantically. "Yes, sir. Anything, Mr. Wolf." Fisher looked at Maya. "Go to my room. There's a black dress in the closet. Put it on. We're going to a party." The Metropolitan Museum of Art was a fortress of light and privilege. Fisher's black SUV bypassed the lines of limousines, heading directly for a service entrance. Leo, his face pale and his arm in a crude sling, flashed an all-access security badge, one he'd procured for Holloway's team, to the guards. "Mr. Wolf is making a surprise inspection for Mr. Holloway," Leo stammered. The guards, recognizing Leo and not daring to question Fisher, waved them through. They moved through the museum's sterile basement and emerged at the back of the great hall, a sea of champagne and couture. They were just in time. Victor Holloway, tan and beaming, was taking the stage to thunderous applause. "Thank you. Tonight we celebrate the future," he boomed. "And I am thrilled to announce that as of tomorrow, Helios Dynamics will be joining the Holloway family." The crowd cheered. Holloway held up a hand, a predatory smirk playing on his lips. "Now, some of you may have heard of a spirited negotiation with my friend Fisher Wolf." He said the name with pitying condescension. "I'm afraid Fisher couldn't be here tonight. He's been detained. He has, shall we say, taken a step back to reconsider his priorities." The crowd chuckled, sensing a rival's defeat. "He's telling them you're finished," Maya whispered, her hands clenched. "He's about to be," Fisher replied, his voice a low growl. He pulled out his burner phone and sent a single text. "Do it now." On stage, Holloway raised his glass. "So, a toast to the future, to Helios, and to me." As he said "me," the massive screens behind him, which had been showing the Helios logo, flickered and went black. A new image appeared, a bank ledger, an offshore account. Holloway's smile faltered. Then an audio file began to play, hissing through the massive speakers. It was Holloway's voice, tinny and secret. "I don't care if Bennett gets suspicious. You retire him. Make it look like a suicide. Just get me that damn ledger." The hall went dead silent. Holloway's tan face went a ghostly, blotchy white. "What? Who is doing this?" he stammered into the mic. "I am." Fisher-Wolf's voice boomed through the sound system. A spotlight, commandeered, swiveled from the stage and pinned Fisher and Meyer at the back of the room. The crowd gasped. They were a vision of violence. Fisher, in a fresh suit, couldn't hide the raw, swelling bruise under his eye or the marks on his throat. Meyer, in a simple black dress, had a dark bruise flowering on her cheek. They began to walk down the main aisle. The crowd parted for them like the Red Sea. "You wanted to announce an acquisition, Victor," Fisher said, his voice echoing. "Let's talk about one. Let's talk about your acquisition of my head of security." He gestured, and the spotlight found Leo, now flanked by 2 uniformed officers. "Let's talk about your use of cartel money," Fisher continued. The screens flashed again. Ronan's face, more bank transfers. "And let's talk," Fisher said, his voice dropping as he reached the stage, "about the murder of Arthur Bennett." "This is slander! Lies!" Holloway shrieked, his composure shattered. Meyer stepped forward and took the microphone from his limp, shaking hand. "My name is Meyer Bennett," she said, her voice clear and carrying. "Arthur Bennett was my father. For 1 year, this man has hunted me to hide his crimes. He sent a murderer to kill my father, and then to kill me. He failed. As if on cue, the main doors of the museum burst open. FBI agents in dark suits flooded the room. "Victor Holloway," the lead agent announced, his voice needing no microphone. "You are under arrest for securities fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, and racketeering." Holloway didn't fight. He just folded. The charisma evaporated, leaving a pale, terrified man who was cuffed and read his rights. The room erupted. The press swarmed, cameras flashing, questions being shouted. Fisher-Wolf ignored them all. He stood on the stage and watched the man who had tried to destroy him be dragged away. He turned and looked at Meyer. She was watching Holloway go, and the tears she'd held back for a year were finally streaming down her face. But she was smiling. It was a smile of terrible, painful, beautiful relief. Fisher stepped toward her. He hesitated, his hand hovering, just as it had in the kitchen. This time he didn't pull it back. He gently, almost awkwardly, placed his hand on her shoulder. She didn't flinch. She turned and, to the absolute shock of the entire New York business world, she leaned into him. Fisher-Wolf, the rude, cold, untouchable billionaire, stood in the center of the chaos and did something no one had ever seen him do. He put his arm around her and held on. And so, the Holloway empire, built on lies and murder, was shattered. Meyer Bennett, her father's name cleared, stepped out of the shadows and into a new life, not as a waitress, but as a core analyst at Wolf Capital. The fortress Fisher-Wolf had built around himself was finally breached, not by force, but by a woman who refused to be afraid. She hadn't just saved her own life. She had, in the end, saved his. Thank you for listening to this story. It just proves that true courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being terrified and acting anyway. What did you think of the final twist at the gala? Let me know your favorite part in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of revenge and redemption, please hit that like button, share it with a friend, and make sure you subscribe and ring the bell. We release new, gripping stories every week, and you won't want to miss what's next. We'll see you in the next one.